Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this wonderful session. I'm so excited to have you here with us and with some more chapter leadership on the Games for Change side. This is Growing Games for Change Globally. This is a session that we hold every year at the festival where we start talking to and highlighting some of the work of our wonderful chapter leads. As some of you know, right, Games for Change is based out of New York City in the US. But of course, our mission is global, and we have a lot of awesome partners who have helped kind of foster more community within separate regions around the world. I'm joined today by a few of those folks, all of our chapter directors, Dale Liniger from Games for Change Asia Pacific. We've got Glenn Gillis of the newest G4C Chapter in G4C Africa. Hello, Glenn. And then we've also got Judah Solon, I believe, is on the call as well. We'll see him in a second.
I'm just messaging him in now.
And Judah Solon is representing Games for Change LATAM. Judah Solon, if you're having issues, maybe try refreshing and just hitting that share audio video button again, but we'll be around. So as we get started, folks, I want to kind of lay some of the expectation for what the session is going to look like. I'm going to be helping to lead conversation. I realized I didn't introduce myself. My name is Raul Carvajal. I'm one of the festival producers. I wear lots of hats at this organization. I'm one of the festival producers, but I'm also our director of production and director of XR for Change. But today, I am the chapter liaison, and I've been helping some of these folks with a bunch of questions and lots of the awesome work that they've been doing locally, really to just help create an easier line of communication between our chapters and G4C HQ. Hey, Susan. Good to see you. I'm going to be helping to lead some of this discussion, but it's going to flow. Really, I want to give everybody a better idea of the specific work that each of our chapters are doing. Kind of think a bit about the chapter model as it currently stands, and maybe some of the successes and challenges that come with that model. But more than anything, I really want to help make this work more specific for you as a community and a viewer, so that potentially in the future you have a line and a direct line, hopefully, to any of these chapter leads to potentially support or volunteer for, or even just be aware of, right? Because all of their work is really stellar and very specific. So we just want to help highlight a lot of that. At a certain point, we will have questions and answers towards the end of the roundtable. So certainly, if you'd like to ask a question, you can start doing so in this Q&A panel on the right-hand side of the session tab. And I'll be keeping an eye there. But of course, if anything we say here is relevant to your work, please talk in the chat as well. We'd love to hear from you. So with that, I will actually let some of our directors introduce themselves and maybe their day jobs when they're not directing for the Games for Change community. Why don't we start with you, Jules?
Okay. Well, hello and welcome everyone to New York. Widespread New York over the globe, a virtual New York. We really miss the festival in Manhattan a lot, but on the other hand, the opportunities, the possibilities of meeting much more people and having lots of interactions are really amazing. So at the end of the day, I think we are fighting a difficult battle, but Games for Change is one of these frontiers where we can make it happen, where we can overcome these challenges. So in Brazil, as so many of you may know, situation is not easy. Education, culture, science, health, the public interest, the public sphere is being destroyed. Not only by a virus, by a biological virus, but a much more difficult to understand process, because it's political, it's cultural, it's socioeconomic. Structural racism is really killing thousands of young people. Thousands of black youth are being killed in Brazil by the police, by the organized crime, by the militia. It's really challenging. So I really want to be very brief about what we've been doing over 10 years. We've been mostly in Brazil rather than Latin America. That's one of our frustrations, but we hope that by going online now, it really started last year, and this year we hope to do that as well. We are launching a new program, that's the Student Ambassadors Program. So we really want to build up a Latin American diplomatic force for students that are interested in game design and gamification processes, games for change, games for health, to become ambassadors, political activists with an international perspective, getting to know how is it possible that in the midst of such a pandemic, such a catastrophic situation, we can unite, we can connect, we can build up, we can be creative, we can leverage our local strengths and build up something that will help us achieve the next stage beyond what we're living now. Lots of projects are paradoxically are coming up. Our Games for Change Latin America has been expanding, and we expect the Ambassadors Program to be one of these really incredible opportunities. So whoever is interested in becoming an ambassador, especially those in Latin America that are watching us now, make contact. Come to our booth, visit our booth. We have more than 10 students, undergraduate students. We have lots of live action going on in our booth because there's so many projects. This year we are partnering with SB Games. It's the largest academic game studies association in Brazil. So come and visit us. You know about the SB Games. Come and visit us, and you know about Fael and Rebel. It's the non-digital games or ludic association, and they are also running their festival, their forum with us this year. We have a special Pitch for Change. It's the 3rd edition of our Pitch for Change. Pitch for Change is really about startups, and the winner, the award winner for last year's Pitch for Change is a wonderful game. You can check that out in our booth. It's a beautiful game. We are partnering with Children of the World. It's a wonderful game project, game design project that's now moving on and on. It's not ready, but you can talk to these guys from their games. So there's lots of activity going on, and I invite you all to come to this Games for Change Latin America booth, become student ambassadors, bring your game to our Pitch for Change, the 3rd edition. That will be really nice. We're going to hold our festival this year in November, from 10th to 15th of November. And our main subject, our main challenge is really about health and knowledge. How can we use games to help people, especially young people in peripheries, slums, underserved communities, to face the challenge of becoming, activists, critics, but not only critics, but builders of a better future? How can we use games to enhance and overcome the failures of learning processes, of the infrastructures, educational infrastructures that are being destroyed by the pandemic? So it's millions of students that are being left out of school. It's really it's even difficult to measure the impact, the sheer impact of this catastrophe over one generation of students. So that's our challenge, our community of game designers that have change in their minds to face these challenges. This year, we're going to face the health and education, the health and knowledge, the health and technology challenge. We have to save people. So games can heal, games can cure, and games will help us overcome the pandemic.
Thank you, Gilson. That's such a wonderful context for a lot of the work that you've been doing. And obviously it's wrapped up in so many of the recent developments over the course of the last year and a half or so. But I know that you've been an ardent supporter of ours in the region for a long time, and in Brazil specifically. So just want to thank you for that, and thank you for being here today. Dale, I'd like to move on to you, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and maybe a bit of the context under which G4C Asia Pacific is starting to work in after our announcement and your formation last year.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Dale Liniger. I'm happily directing things over here in Australia, but we have a really wonderful community that's joined together since we sort of announced that we were starting Games for Change Asia Pacific. at least 1 or 2 people are online now, and it's 5 a.m. here, so thank you. They're very dedicated. I guess we started our journey last year, and we were considering rushing things to get our first festival done last year. Circumstances kind of allowed us to wait a little bit longer, which was nice, and visit a couple of these Games for Change New York festivals and see how things operate. And we've got a community of probably 60 or 70 people on our Slack who are all helping to organise our festival. We've just done our call for submissions. We had around 70 submissions, formal submissions through that process, which was really nice, and quite it gave us all a lot of confidence, I guess, because we've been working in the serious games sphere and we've been doing a lot of conferences and events over the past decade or so. But serious games has always been sidelined a little bit and played second fiddle to health or to simulation or to whatever the conference was about. So this is the first time when we've really been able to focus on Games for Change, and the community is obviously out there, and the community wants a community to join, and they want a stage to stand up on. And I guess that's what we see our role as being, is just to highlight all of the great work that's being done in our region. I think, and very briefly, that one of the challenges that we're facing is what Gilson alluded to, in that I guess because we're based in Australia at the moment, most of our submissions are Australian, most of our supporters are Australian, but we are building up strong communities and strong representatives around the region as well. Some with more difficulty than others, but that's perhaps another topic to discuss. But yeah, it's really wonderful, and we're looking at a 2-day festival later this year, and we've definitely got enough content to fill it, so we're really happy about that.
And that'll be part of Melbourne Games Week, is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. Melbourne International Games Week, which is a big week here, and it gives us a bit of government support as well, which is nice. And that includes a conference called Game Connect Asia Pacific, which is a developer conference, and also PAX, which many of you might know, the Penny Arcade Conference, which gets something like 80,000 people, I think, attend that. So it is part of something much larger than we are, which is nice as well.
Wonderful. And I want to talk about events again towards the end of the session, just so that everybody's aware of all the programming that y'all have in store for us. Last but certainly not least, the newest member of our tribe here, Glenn Gillis. Hello.
Yeah, Raul, thank you. And yeah, it's wonderful to connect with everybody. And it was great to be able to share the news this morning that we're going to take a bold leap of faith and open up an African chapter. Yeah, just hearing Gilson talk about the kinds of challenges that Brazil is facing. You know, I guess we all need to ask ourselves, what is the problem we're trying to solve for? And in my mind, you know, the world is absolutely at an inflection point. We are at a crisis when it comes to the environment, when it comes to mental health and wellness. You know, when people think about Africa, unfortunately, I think most of the images that come to people's minds are not of prosperity and of people who have agency in their life. You know, it's unfortunately largely true. Of course, it's on the other hand not true at all. There are many amazing, incredible people on the continent. It's a massive place. It's 54 countries, depending on how you count them. You know, it's also the youngest continent. So over 40% of people on the African continent are under the age of 25. So if we're going to solve the problem for anybody or with anybody, it's got to be with Africa. We talk about diversity and inclusion. It's a theme which is so close to everyone's heart at Games for Change, and it speaks to the power of what games are capable of doing. And if we don't include Africa, and again, it almost feels wrong to use just one word to describe such a big place. But we've got to start somewhere. So my day job is I started a company called Sea Monster, and we've delivered over 70 games and AR applications over the last 10 years. We've got a nice team, but we operate largely in a vacuum. You know, we've been at the forefront of just talking about what Games for Change are actually about, getting beyond sort of advertising games and helping really just position in the minds of decision makers here that we have a vibrant community in South Africa and in Africa, These are serious tools for change. They should be taken seriously, they should be researched appropriately, and they should be funded appropriately. If we're going to start to address some of these big challenges, we've got to also look at new models for commercialization. So we're passionate about just crossing boundaries, just trying to connect people across the divide and saying, what are you sitting with? How do we get together? And so, yeah, I'm delighted. I said to Dale that, I want to borrow the playbook just as he's kind of figuring things out one step at a time. And of course, with G4C HQ kind of giving us the guardrails on this. We just want to meet like-minded people who want to act and who want to be bigger than something and be part of something bigger than themselves. So that's why we're doing this, and we're very excited about it. We'll be launching in Africa Games Week. Not really an official launch. We'll see how far we get and who comes on board. Probably have a one-day event at the very least. I'm mindful that there's no shortage of people who want to talk about these things, but I'm also hearing from the other panelists about the challenges that go with organizing these big events. So we'll just take it one step at a time. But yeah, delighted to be part of the family. So thanks, Raul.
Delighted to have you. So I guess I want to start off with that same springboard that you've laid out for us, Glenn, which is being specific about the problem we're trying to solve. I know that as an organization, Games for Change takes an extremely Big Ten approach to what kinds of games for change we feature and what kinds of problems these games are applicable to. And for all the viewers, I'm sure that they'll see that even in the programming of this event. Right. Of course, we've got our three legacy tracks: games for learning, health and wellness, civic and social issues, and then, of course, the expansion of XR for change with immersive media now at the forefront in its own track. But really, if it's a game or an immersive experience that's being leveraged for any sort of real world positive impact that can be justified in one way or another, that it's something that's likely relevant to at least part of our community. And that's kind of the other side of the coin too, right? It's not just the problem, but also the people who want to help solve those problems. Again, you have a huge representation of that at the festival today and over the course of the week. We're not just talking about developers, but all of the people in the ecosystem who really believe in this mission. That includes educators, it includes other nonprofits, funders, of course, academics and researchers who are studying maybe more formally, people in the healthcare space. It's really not just limited to one subset or one skill set. And I suppose the question to you all as a panel to kick us off with is, Games for Change over the course of the last 18 years almost in New York has had something of a challenge, which is how do we justify this media as a strong place to begin some of this impact work? And what we've seen, especially locally, is that is becoming an easier and easier argument to make, not only as the media is prolific, but also as folks now see that some of the topics being tackled are more mature and some of the technology itself is obviously matured. So I wonder, how difficult is it for you all to maybe have some of these conversations with other folks who are maybe just learning about the Games for Change movement in your own regions, or whether or not you're kind of seeing that similar shift in the tide where it's easier to kind of take it for granted that, yes, this is a media form that's already maturing and should be used in the way that we're talking about it today. And that's for anybody to kick it off with.
I'm happy just to take a quick stab at it. Making games is expensive, except compared to all the alternatives. And I think COVID has done us a lot of favors. It's proven that traditional e-learning, for example, in corporate audiences, which we've known for quite a long time, isn't largely effective. I mean, it simply can't be thrilling to click through, a series of PowerPoint slides and call that real learning, especially when we seem fixated on content. And what we need is skills and competency. So I think it has become apparent that as the alternatives, or the true cost of the alternatives is now apparent for everyone, because those things were not always priced in. I've always done my learning this way. We're seeing with school kids, they have the power, they have devices, they have access to learning resources. But have we really honored the transition into the new media? Because again, we've just simply taken, somebody standing in front of a classroom as the font of all knowledge and just put that person behind a screen, so it's that same journey. Whereas we haven't really unlocked the power of games to structure interactions, to give rules, to give feedback, to give all the things that they do. So I definitely think it's easier. Corporates are scared. The world is ruled at the moment by fear, and it's a human response, of course, to the difficult circumstances. And it will be those brave few companies on the one hand who will look to new ways of doing things, and will realize that at scale, nothing is as cost effective as a game, because you're going to deliver hours of voluntary engagement. You're not going to force people to do that. I think it's harder when it comes to the public sector. We're dealing with essentially medieval organizations, failed democracies, failed state institutions in South Africa, in Africa, everywhere. And so they better get out of the way, because where governments fail, private sector and others intervene. And of course, the opposite is true too. So I hope that we're at the beginning of a new age where the money flows, the people are already there, and the tools, the creativity, the knowledge, the stories are there. We just need new models to make it all happen at scale. But it's as an exciting time as we could want for, because the opposite isn't working anymore.
And Gilson, I mean, you've been having some of these conversations for a long time as the oldest chapter in the group so far. I wonder whether or not you are seeing some of that as well, or how the conversations maybe have changed, especially in more of the academic circles, which I know that you've got a lot of experience with.
Yes, well, we have the advantage of working with the University of São Paulo as our background, backstage, back office. It's really a wonderful university. It's going through a crisis as well, because it's a public university. It's the largest, the best university in Brazil, but it's going through a crisis as well. The thing is that when you are facing such an enormous crisis, there's also a reaction. People become more generous, because they at last realize that it's not just about individual survival, it's about the collective survival and the recovery of the public sphere. So what has been seen at the University of São Paulo is a more generous attitude among professors, and even the relationship between the staff, the administrative staff of the university, the professors, the students. There's more solidarity, there's more of an understanding that we are in this together. And but of course, it's really difficult to find the way out. But once you have that kind of attitude, more collaborative, it really sets the stage for finding new solutions, finding new forms of dialogue. The same goes with the companies. The same goes with the funding agencies and sponsors. There's a growing perception that the system is the problem. It's not this guy or that guy, this party or that party. There is a systemic problem. There are systemic risks. So there are some phenomena like climate crisis or health problems that are really systemic. They depend on some sort of generosity, some sort of cooperation, some sort of collaboration in order for the game of survival to really move on. And that's where we've been now talking with lots of people about systems literacy. We are working very much in that kind of perspective. From children to company leaders, to community leaders, there's this urge to realize that we are facing systemic issues, systemic problems, and without systems literacy, you cannot face them. It's not just a matter of running a beautiful tiny project here, a community project over there. It's really systemic. And then people realize that games are systems. That if you want to really understand the logic of a system, there's nothing better than going to a game jam and try to build a game, to design a game. Because every game is a system of rules, and it goes up together or it falls together. It's really systemic. It's a language, it's a technology, but it's also an attitude towards understanding the interplay of factors, of elements. So the engine is not the solution, but it's one of the ways to realize that we face systemic problems is to understand the engine that's behind these problems. So we've been approaching people in different areas, different stakeholders, private sector, public sector, with this idea that we all need some kinds of new literacies that face different types of risks. We're calling these multi-risk literacies or multi-risk applied literacies, because it's really important to understand, to realize that behind that beautiful phrase, life is a game or the world is a game, there's something really important. There's a message within that logic, and the message is problems are systemic. Either we face them by addressing systemic issues, or we will fail again and again. But then what's better than designing a game for a child, for a teenager, to realize how systems work? What's better than, trying to imagine a different world, to fantasize another universe, a metaverse? So that's the way we're going, using the very logic of game design to address real problems by connecting the systemic nature of a game with the systemic nature of the problems that we are facing.
So, I mean, you alluded earlier as well, Jocelyn, that the collaborations themselves are part of these systems, yeah? And I've been extremely impressed with Dale's rapid acquisition of these 60, 70 folks in the region that you've been working in to help tackle some of these same issues, and also just to help define, I guess, the problems faced locally. Dale, I wonder whether or not you can maybe speak to what the strategy has been there, and how the group is sort of collectively helping to understand how to move forward and what to tackle first when you are posed with such a massive problem space.
Yeah, I guess from my perspective, my first thing was to not admit defeat. That sort of come to mind, but just admit that I was not the person to lead things. I think I'm good in terms of systems thinking. I love putting things in spreadsheets. I love breaking things up and looking at what do we need to solve this. So there's I guess two big issues. One, we looked at, well, we need, when we're talking about games for change, we're talking about learning, health, and social change, which are not three distinct areas. There's huge overlap. There's games that address all of them, or one of them, or more. And second, that it wasn't really up to me or even us as a group to define what those problems were in our area. And that's looking at Asia Pacific as a whole, because from country to country, the problems vary, drastically. And I don't want to even say what the problems are here in Australia, because somebody might say, well, no, actually, that is a problem. But, as you go to one country, war will be a problem. The next one, the government will be repressing the populace. The next one, women's rights are the biggest issue. So I guess one of our first thoughts was, firstly, how do we get people with expertise in those areas to be the ones who are judging the submissions, for example, judging those streams, running those streams, making sure all the voices are heard. And secondly, how do we make sure that we're actually getting people from each area to come and speak to those issues as well, and to present what's important to them. Because, we've got, and there's somebody online now who works for an organisation, they've got a very strong environmental bent. So every time we start talking about a problem, they'll be, well, we could plant 100 trees to offset that. But then we'll have other people who are like, well, no, but what about the mental health issues behind that? Another person will be, well, no, that's wasting money. What about the poverty? So it's good to have all these different voices involved. And I see that as part of my job, I guess, is to coordinate the sharing of those voices. and to try not to drown them out. And that's the biggest issue that I have, because I like talking, and I've always got very strong opinions. But I've learnt the thing lately: strong opinions loosely held, I think, is how I'm trying to approach things as we go, and to set up so that we do have the right level of expertise in each area, to, I guess, listen to the voices and decide what should be put up on the stage. And for me to try to get out of the way of that as much as possible, which is perhaps a little bit different than it might be in some other areas, because we're very fortunate in Australia in that we don't have a lot of the issues that a lot of people in the world have at the moment. So it's a position of privilege, I must admit. Yeah, great privilege.
Well, it's interesting, though, that I think I tend to agree that the position of leadership that some of us have, especially curatorially, can certainly be prescriptive. And I think that some of the work that we've done together, the best versions of it are less prescriptive, right? And sort of self-defined by the audiences that we're reaching. So I kind of see collaboration as a key step at each piece of it, even when it comes to the game jams or when it comes to programs with youth, right? Which all of us have been interested in. So much of that is self-guided. So much of that is accelerated even by just the imagination and the input, right, at the grassroots level. So I'm very encouraged and enthused to see that at such an early stage, G4C APAC has kind of like embraced that and recognized that, let's see what the people want and take it there. And of course, like the others on this panel, I think would agree. As we get to the last 20 or 15 minutes of our conversation today, I want to make sure that we move past not just like the sphere, the contextual sphere of this conversation, and also start talking a bit more about some of those collaborations and how people can reach out and really activate some of this work. Gilson, I wonder whether or not you can speak a bit more about some of the successes that you've had reaching some local partners, and even this recent growth that you experienced last year. We recognize that leveraging the online platform, like you mentioned, just helped really bring in some new voices and expose some of the work to folks that were already, of course, interested, but for one reason or another, maybe weren't able to engage in the same way. So I'd love for you to just speak a bit about some of those successes and what you think some of the other chapters and some of our community might learn from just activating some of those people.
Well, one of the interesting tracks, so to speak, that we can follow and has been a successful approach to opening up new horizons for dialogue is like talking to museums and connecting the national history, connecting historical narratives to identity issues, national identity issues, or even to the identity of the personality of individuals, the identity of individuals. So we've been working with three major and totally different profiles in terms of museology, so to speak. One is the Paulista Museum, the Museum of the Independence. We did a wonderful partnership last year because next year, 2022, that will be the bicentennial of Brazil's independence from Portugal. And most of the collections that are related to this period are at the Museum of the Independence, which actually belongs, it's part of the framework, the institutional framework of the University of São Paulo. It's a huge museum going through a restoration, and of course with the pandemic it's closed. But then last year we connected with them, and in our Game Jam rally, we did lots of game jams. And one of them was really about designing games that would celebrate critically the history of Brazil's independence. So these games are in the making. They are going to be finished this year. They will be presented in our festival. They are a result of this kind of attitude of opening up, even within the university, opening up between sectors that are, on the one hand, more academic, on the other hand, more cultural. So these parts are coming together. So that's an interesting experience. The second one, also within the university, it's the Institute of Brazilian Studies. So next year, again, 2022, we are celebrating 100 years of the modernist artistic movement in Brazil. And the Institute of Brazilian Studies is a different kind of museum. It's not really a museum you can visit. It mostly about assets and the legacy of these artists and writers and all that. But they are opening their archives for game designers that want to create games about the modernist movement in Brazil. And so we call it the Digital Macunaíma, which is the name of the title of one of these masterpieces of Brazilian modernism. So it's another example. The third one is really outside the walls of the university. It's really the museum of the person. There's thousands of life stories that have been recorded over the years. And there's really thousands of images and voices, audios that reflect the lives, the personalities of these people. So it's a completely different approach to museology. And we're also inviting people to play with life stories and seek for, inspiration in these life stories, in these memories. So playing with memory and playing with identity, playing with national identity, playing with individual personalities, that has become one of our important connections. The other one is called WASH. WASH is the Workshop for Aficionados in Software and Hardware. It's an amazing movement in Brazil, connecting high schools and for robotics, basically for the STEAM paradigm, the STEAM approach: science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So when you go into this movement with teachers in high schools and students, you realize how important games can be in going beyond the classroom. So we are now connecting with WASH, and we're going to run these challenges with high schools all over Brazil that are into the STEAM paradigm and mostly designing games, little games, using Scratch to design games. But again, it's really an opportunity to realize the systemic nature of playfulness. And so we are connecting to high schools, we are connecting to museums, some more creativity and a more, let's say, ambitious look at the quality of connections. So in order to improve the quality of connections, you have to do some kind of curatorship, and you have to improve your capacity to, to foster dialogue between different areas of knowledge, between different levels and qualities of institutional organization. It can be a university, but it can be a museum outside university. And then, of course, children and youth in the slums, children and youth in the poorest areas of the country. That's where it's the challenge is the most important. So we are also connecting to local organizations, local NGOs, social projects that are already have the knowledge. So the idea is here to connect university and social movement with art projects, and of course, let's see what comes out of it. It's not just a top-down relationship between university and NGOs. It's really, we are on an equal standing, it's a level playing field, and we realize that we have to connect ourselves, because the public policy, or the absence of public policy, is taking us into some kind of necropolitics. That means death as a policy. And the only way out of this, because of course the poorest, the black communities, thousands of black youth being killed by the police, by gang, organized crime, and all that. If we connect with the university is not a party, it's not a business, it's really about the future. So we are very much investing in that kind of connection with media groups, really bottom-up organizations that have been created and are doing a great job to fight not only poverty but hunger during the pandemic. So how do we take this over to the next step in terms of learning and changing the world in a playful way, with a playful attitude?
I love that. There's such an obvious connection, I think, that to a lot of what you're saying, to this attitude of tapping into the subject matter expert, which we all have outlined, right? When you have a game developer or an organization that's really trying to leverage some of these media forms, and they want to do it internally, and they feel like they need so much internal expertise to really do justice to a thing. We know that, in fact, the opposite is true, right? There are already folks outside who are working heavily and are on the ground and whose expertise can be so valuable. And even part of us gathering here today is just another exercise in opening those doors and hopefully fostering some more connections. So if I'm hearing you correctly, Jolson, it's just another leg on the tripod of collaboration that we discussed earlier, and certainly worthwhile. I want to make sure that we get to a couple of audience questions. I see some folks in the chat and in the Q&A. Certainly, if you feel like you want to ask a question to the panel via video, you can do so by requesting to share your audio and video. I'm going to answer Henry here in the Q&A, who's wondering whether or not we have a European Games for Change sector, and certainly we do. We are not joined by our other director at the moment, Jean-Michel Blottier, who has been the co-director of Games for Change Europe for some time. And I think if he were here describing the situation alongside the rest of our panelists, he would say something quite similar, right? Which is that we have the shared challenge of taking advantage of some of the quite obvious problems in our region, and that there's an obvious call to action, I think, to try and meet some of those issues. Games for Change has no shortage of people who are passionate and who are very excited to tackle some of these things. And hopefully some of what you're hearing today just helps you understand a bit more specifically, really, what this collaboration might be like for you. If it may be as simple as connecting one of our directors or one of our other volunteers to an organization that you may have been to be involved with, or that you happen to even know about and be passionate about. It really starts there. And of course, we can't tackle everything simultaneously, but it's about the depth of a relationship, not necessarily about accruing quantities. I'd love to get to some other questions as well. I've got a video request here from Gregory Fisher. Gregory, if you'd like to come on board, happy to answer your questions. I just accepted your video request here. And if anyone else has questions in the chat, please drop them in the Q&A or in the chat area. Otherwise, I'll continue here. Glenn, I wonder, as you've done your work at Sea Monster, I know that collaboration has been a key part of some of your work as well, specifically in the education arena. If you wanted to help sort of like help us understand what's really marked success for you in that regard when it comes to external collaborations.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think that, just to pick up on Jolson's comments again, a lot of a little makes a lot. And so what we do find is that you just need to find pockets of like-minded people who are sharing the same belief that something needs to change, and just get out of the way largely. So it is very much about not being able to control the system, but just being able to look at a particular problem and saying, okay, I can help in this following way. We've worked with a lot of banks and insurance companies, and of course, games have been used for the longest time around financial inclusion and entrepreneurship. But I think it's finally dawning on some people that this isn't a nice to have. This isn't a requirement of a license that needs to be met. This is critical, and the people who do this well, authentically, and first will own the trusted relationship in that space. And I don't know if I forgot this, or maybe I'm confused, but banks are supposed to be about trust. Brands are about trust. And so if we're going to go back to reinventing these things, we do need to recognize that, sorry to use the term, but disintermediation, if we can find a few of those people who are sitting with the problem and a few pockets of expertise, we can largely get out of the way, and that solution will kind of craft itself. I think the rate of change, that we'll get more impetus into this, we'll get more people wanting to be part of this, because we've got to also make sure that Games for Change is a career, that there's opportunities in this, that the creators are being rewarded for the work that they do. This is not just a labor of love, for this flywheel to really start turning and recruiting the best business people, the best marketers, the best of everything into this industry, because it needs to be like an industry. But it does start, and I definitely am getting the sense that we're at that point of getting out of the way, but just creating enough of a framework within which people can get on with it. So Dale, I too have control issues. And I'll do my best to make sure that we create enough space for everybody in Games for Change Africa. I'm just going to drop our email address into the chat. So if anyone wants to make contact with us, please get on board. These are all chapters of the same book. Sorry, somebody had to say it, so I just got it out of the way.
I love that. I'm now kicking myself for not thinking about that. Dale and Judith, I also want to make sure that folks get your contact information to make sure that folks are able to reach out should they like to. You all have websites as well that folks can check out, and even some newsletters, of course. So any information to that end that you can share in chat for people to follow up with would be awesome. And then, of course, I promised that we would circle back to the events as well. So Dale, can you remind us the target dates for your festival later this year?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're part of Melbourne International Games Week, as mentioned. We'll be running workshops and masterclasses on October 5th, and then the festival will run on October 6th and 7th. We're timing it so it'll start generally, and this won't mean much to a lot of people, but midday Australian time through to 6 or 7 p.m. And what that means is that everybody from New Zealand across to India can attend the festival at a reasonable time during waking hours. And it's funny, that's the way this virtual event industry has sort of all worked out, isn't it? It's all about time zones.
Totally. And Jilson, can you remind us about your festival dates as well? Oh, you're on mute. Excuse me.
Yes, we're getting ready for our 9th edition of the Latin American Games for Change Festival. That will be November 10 to 15. I've already pasted the website and the email. Get in touch. We are looking forward to a really, really exciting and impactful event this
year. Well, I want to say thank you once again to each of you who've been just champions locally and just incredible friends as well to the organization. So I really am so enthused by this continued collaboration, which hopefully will only grow. And of course, to the audience who's viewing, this is your official call to action. If you want to get involved, you certainly can. There's no shortage of opportunities. So reach out to any of these folks, or if you'd like to reach out to me and work with Games for Change HQ, get redirected, I'm happy to be that as well. You can hit me at raul@gamesforchange.org, and I'll drop that in chat as well. And with that, that's our time. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your festival, and we look forward to the following festivals later this year.
Thanks, Raul. Thanks all.
Thank you.